Genesis chapter 2, the introduction. We are now in Genesis chapter 2, and please allow me to give you a little background of what I have learned in this chapter. As I study the second chapter, I find it interesting because after 6 days, God ceased from all works of creation. In miracles, he has overruled nature, but never changed its settled course or added to it. God did not rest as one weary, but as one well pleased. Number one, the Sabbath. In this chapter, I learned that Sabbath was established by God. Genesis chapter 2, verse 1 to 3. I thought before when I was young that the Sabbath is only created by man. Because if you can see, people in the past and in present have different kinds of ways, practices, and views regarding the Sabbath. Whatever your stand observing Sabbath, the important thing is you are deeply researching what is the truth, because now I am convinced that God originated the Sabbath. Number two, the particulars in creation. Furthermore, as I study chapter 2, I learned that God has written particular things about the creation. Genesis chapter 2, verses 4 to 7 gives us details on how God created everything, starting from the generations of the heavens and the earth. Verse 4. Number 3, the garden. Not only chapter 2 is about specific details, I realized, and it was so amazing because God did not only created trees that wrestle in the forest or plants that scatter on the ground that has no arrangements. To my astonishment, God planted a garden and God named it the Garden of Eden. Genesis chapter 2, verse 8 down to verse 14. I believe this is not an ordinary garden that we saw in our present time today. This is a very spectacular garden that no kings on this earth can fathom. Number 4, the placing of man. Additionally, the garden that God was made is not to become the very well-known tourist spot on the face of the earth. It is not made for the angelic beings to dwell, but God preciously made it because there he will place the man and the woman that he formed. Genesis chapter 2, verse 15. Number 5, God's command. Another thing that struck me is that God instructed Adam, or commanded the man, that he may eat any tree in the garden, but not the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Because if he will eat it, surely death is on its way. Verses 16 and 17. This is the very first command of God to men. Number 6, the naming, woman formed, and marriage instituted. Lastly, in Genesis chapter 2, verses 18 down to verse 25, it's now turning for Adam to name names for the animals on earth and all creatures. I read also how the woman was formed by God, and after that, God did not only give right away Eve to Adam, but God divinely instituted marriage in the garden. This is the very first garden wedding in the history of mankind, and God has established it. As we end our discussion, I hope I have given you a wonderful illustration of what happened in the book of Genesis chapter 2. And as we begin our series on this chapter, I pray that we will realize and see who God is and who is Jesus Christ. We will discover more about Him as we go along in our study. May God bless us all. Amen.